today we're going to turn you into a drawer who can draw whatever you want. And just so you know what I'm using today, it's not imperative that you have this, but I have a 12 by 18 pad, which is kind of nice. It's got a good width and a good height, and it's pretty versatile without being such a huge pad. And it's the weight is 80 pound. So get 70 sheets with it. 80 pound is a pretty thick piece of paper, and I'm going to turn around from that. So this is just a regular old drawing pad. You could use other things. You could use some of the pads now that are called mixed media. I want to have what they call a tooth, something on the paper that is a little bit textured. And so I've chosen this paper, this 70-pound paper, to do that. And then I am going to also be using this Canson tracing paper pad. And I love this pad. There are other pads that can be used and also can be similar to the transparency of this. But I just want you to see how transparent this paper is. You will be frustrated if your paper is milky and you can't see things through it like this. So again, this is 50 sheets here. It's 25 pounds, 9 inches by 12 inches, and it comes in pads at least as big as 18 by 24 inches. So you can see just anything underneath it, you're going to be able to see it, but particularly if you get something that you can push it flat onto. So I'll put the tracing paper pad off to the side. I love tracing, and one of the things that you might have heard is that tracing is cheating. Tracing isn't cheating. Tracing is taking back your life and as a drawer, and on your way to doing observational drawing, and even once you're really good at observational drawing, it makes it so that you too, like many of the great artists of the world, once we had a way to use photography, can take pictures of things and use the pictures by putting a piece, by printing it. So you can print anything that you find on the internet. And I'm going to start this just a little bit here just to show you what we're doing today, and then I'm going to talk a lot about how to do it, and then also maybe about what is good for selecting to use. This is good because the contrast here between the bird and the foreground is good enough that I am able to easily see what I'm drawing through the paper. And I'm going to make it just that much easier for me by sliding the colored pencils out from underneath it that I had there. I'm like, why is this not working? Because I'd left the colored pencils underneath it. But don't ask me why or how I could have done that, but I did it. So here I am just tracing it. And this is something you might think, well, gosh, you know, aren't you just trying to get the kind of the gist of it, kind of get the how it works and so forth, and does it have to take so long, and do you have to go so slowly and so forth? And the answer is that the tracing is a way of becoming good at drawing. It's a very low stakes thing. You're not looking at something that's three-dimensional and then trying to get that onto your paper. You're actually just looking at something that's two-dimensional, that's actually flat, and going over it. And when I developed, I'm going to go in the eye now, and when I developed my way of teaching people to draw over almost 30 years now, I started noticing at one point, I don't see this quite as much right now, but I started noticing at one point that some of my students had a hard time doing what I'm doing right now, which is really drawing a line over a line. Now, where I'm drawing right now, these aren't already lines. I'm turning this into a line drawing. So there are decisions that I'm making here about where I want to trace. Now that doesn't mean you have to know a whole bunch. It just means that this is an activity that requires you to be very present. And one time I was working with a friend of mine. She wanted me to do some paintings of her dogs. And so she was frustrated. She was kind of in a mood where she was frustrated, and we were under a time limit because I wasn't going to be there forever. It's a place that's not near where I live. And so she kind of felt like I could trace a whole lot faster than I was. And so she came in and traced, I remember, the bottom of a dog paw. And it would be as if let's see, I'll bring in another piece of tracing paper and show you what you don't want to do. And I'll actually do it with a colored pencil, just so you can see the difference in what I'm talking about. You don't want to average or kind of go around super fast. You don't want to be like, oh, okay, well, I hope I get this tracing done fast, so here I go. Okay, well, that's like that, and that's like this, and then this is like that, and then this is like that. And, you know, it might not, I mean, this would give you some, all right, but it's not going to give you what I'm going to be getting with going as slowly as I'm going and being as precise as I'm being. So you don't want to just kind of romp around that with that kind of speed. You want to be working it in a much more methodical way. And then in addition to going around the whole bird, I now, and it's a little harder for you and me to see this because the contrast on these wings are kind of purple, and the darker part of the wing, or where the light isn't catching it as much, is sort of a black. So again, I have to really look at this. Now, one of the things you can do is you can use a light table, which we don't all have a light table sitting around, but we do have a window or a sliding glass door, if possible, where during the day we can do this tracing by taking what we're drawing and putting it into the window with tape, and then coming back in and putting the tracing paper on top of that, and then you get some backlighting in it. Now these guaranteed are going to be just little things that you can't even figure out where they are, these little feathers and so forth, unless you get them here. This is just a great place to establish it and not be like, okay, I'm moving on, and then later I'll just kind of do those. The other thing it makes happen in you is that you really get to see what this bird is about. And in some ways, one of the reasons I picked the hummingbird is that you're not going to draw a hummingbird observationally. Now, that doesn't mean you can't draw a flower or something like that that would sit still for you, that would be a still life. One of the reasons they call it a still life is because it's something that is still enough that you can draw it and it's not moving. So there's a lot of little details I could get in here, but then on the other hand, sometimes getting too many details gets confusing. Now where this white is going to make a difference later in my drawing, so I'm going to get that as best I can. And I may also want to come in here and get a little bit more than I had gotten in here. And I may want to get at least a little bit down about this white that's on the beak. Now, if you will trace each thing, let's say in a picture, let's say I do want to use these flowers, or maybe I want to use some other flowers that are in these calendars that I have. If you'll just make it so that the bird is on this piece here, then you can move your bird anywhere. Whereas if I had used this composition of these flowers in relationship to this bird like that, I'd either have to cut them apart to move them individually or use them together. So one of the things that this allows you to do is to start becoming the boss of your paper. You're the one who decides, like, okay, is the bird going to be here? The bird going to be here or here? So the placement is up to you. If you wanted a smaller bird now, you could copy this, scanning it, or with a copy machine, and then you could reduce it or you could expand it. So you also have the choice of doing that, and it's easier to do that now that it's a line drawing. You also can turn it over, and now the bird could be facing the other direction. And we are going to work on this side here in a second to complete our tracing of it. And to that end, I want to mention that I keep myself a little less confused than normal by writing the word front on here. So to me, this is the front of the paper. It was the first place that I drew on top of, going on top of the hummingbird. So now I flip this over, and since I have all my colored pencils out here, I'm going to take a different color, this is exciting, and write back on it. So this is my back of it. Now I know that I have graphite, and by the by, I was using a woodless pencil. It doesn't have to be woodless. I was using a 4B, which is my favorite grade of pencil. The Bs are the softer ones, and the higher the number, the softer it is. And this could have been sharpened a little bit more, but you kind of want a wider line. So there is, this is the front, and I have this on it. Now you'll see when I draw on this, just backing it up a little bit more, nothing is coming out on the other side, right? Because there's no graphite on this side yet. Now I'm going to turn this over, and I don't even have to think of where I want to place it yet, because right now I just want to now, I'm on the back and I want to back up. In fact, I think I'll write that word, back up the back. Back up, too light. Back up the back. Now, a lot of times my students are thinking about something else when I'm showing this, and they don't back up the back, and then they say, it didn't come through, it didn't transfer, I don't know what happened. What happened is you didn't back up the back. So I usually have a piece of paper underneath here when I do this, just because I don't want it to transfer onto my table, because you'll see that in still using my 4B to back up this line, what was on the front should be transferring somewhat right now. And we see that it does. It's not very dark, okay, here, but it's definitely transferring. Now, one of the reasons it's not transferring too much is because the pencil I'm using is so blunt, so it's not pushing it as easily. But by doing this, and this has to be with graphite, and it's a little hard to see where you've been. You kind of, oh, look, that transferred a lot more. Maybe that was a place that I'd already doubled up. But you can see that what was on the front is coming through onto the paper. And again, I could place this and not move it. I'm moving it around so that it's easy for me with my left hand to be in this position. Now again, when you're working, you can probably work this way with your writing grip. It's not advised, to say the least. I discourage people from drawing with the grip that they use for writing, and I will demonstrate that grip. The grip for writing these days is something like this, and it's kind of hard to see. You have to kind of try to get your face underneath it, and it may be very accurate for people. I can feel some kind of accuracy being able to really drive it in there, but I prefer that we learn how to use a grip for drawing that is like a grip for painting, and this will then transfer for you when you paint, as well as allow you to see what it is you're drawing because you're farther back on your pencil. The more you can see around the area that you're drawing, the better it is for you to know where to go and what to do. Even when you're tracing or with regular drawing, it's easier to see the whole of your composition. If you're right down here like this, you're hiding a lot of what is on your paper, and you're unable to start to see one area, like this area that I'm working on, in relationship to this whole of the bird. There's many reasons for doing this. Now, one of the reasons is to learn how to change your behavior and change your patterns. Have you ever tried that in some other area besides art? Well, you all know that it's not that easy to make a change, but you also should know it's not impossible to make a change. I'm not sure if I've been on this little route before, but it doesn't quite look like it, so I did it again. So you see I'm getting a whole bunch of other little pieces on here as I'm pushing on top of the back of the paper. It's transferring what was already on the front of the paper to the paper underneath it, and it's also not getting a table dirty with it. And when I pulled it away, what did you think? Did you think anything? I kind of thought, maybe I want to somehow draw on that paper that left some odd marks. And sometimes I like to be in relationship to something that's not perfect or that's not what I thought it would be, it's an unknown, and unknown as to what I would want to do with it. So this is just a great way for you to make something on your own paper and to decide on your own composition. And also, as I've been saying, it's going to give you a chance to really hone your skills. Keep going back on my pencil. Hone your drawing skills of following this. There's lots and lots of hand-eye coordination. Now, what we found with my students that are in my classes to learn to optimally teach art to children, I'd actually call it more like with children. It should be art with children. All right, so look, there's the thing of there's the eye, and actually it would be like this. I think I better not try to figure out what that would be and what it is. But anyhow, now I have it on the front. That's the front, and got there first. And now I have, I think, the whole back backed up. And I'm going to take this paper that has quite the wing on it and the head over here and stuff and put it off to the side. I can use this later to try to figure out what I want to do with layering of colored pencils or what I want to do, so I wouldn't just throw that piece of paper out. Now I've got this backed up, and I'm going to turn it back to the front. So it says front, and now it's time for me to decide what I want to do with this. If I want it to be going like this, it seems like they must fly like this. I think I always see them flying like that. I don't see them flying like this. And certainly when they go into a flower, they do this. So just for the simplicity here, I'm going to do this, and I can tell already that I should have done what they do on the cooking shows. And I should have. Now you might want to tape this down so it doesn't move. And I forgot to get my tape off. Oops. Off of my shelf. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to use orange on here, and I'm going to show you how I'm kind of going back and forth. Now, by doing the orange on here, I'm kind of cutting this out as a good transfer in the future back the other way. But you're going to be able to see where I am, and you always want to check to make sure that where you have been, there was adequate graphite on the other side to do the transfer. So I am going to go around the whole thing first here, and we can look at that, and then I can do the rest of it. And maybe for your final viewing pleasure, we can speed up some of this. Looks like I may not have backed that up right there. Yep, see right there, that didn't come through. And that's because there wasn't any graphite back there. So I'm going to take my other piece of paper, push this like that, and then come back in here and get it. I could kind of see that it really hadn't been backed up. It wasn't transferring, it wasn't a dark enough line. So I'm back in business again. I'm back on my front, and I'm working this up now. Now I got to go over where I already have my orange, just remembering that in here I didn't have the graphite on the back, but I do now. So here we go. So this is a really easy thing to do, and one of the things that you may have been frustrated with, you know, because, wow, how do you learn to draw? You know, well, like anything else, you just do it, but man, all the trials and tribulations that you might go through, which are good, I'm not saying they're not, but sometimes the damage to our vulnerable, fragile selves, where we're just continuously not feeling like we're learning anything new and we're not getting any of the results that we want, can all be changed when you start to learn more and get more. I don't think this is backed up right in there. Didn't seem like it had it on the back of it. Let's see. It did not. Let's see if I can just hold this to here and go in there. And where am I saying it did not? Not sure where I thought it didn't. Oh, maybe it was here. I don't know. Let's see. Anyway, this can help you learn a lot. I know one of the things that I feel when I'm doing this, or when I'm doing any kind of drawing, but you know, I certainly have. It was right in there. Let's see if I got that backed up. I still didn't get it backed up, and now I know where it is. It's like a Z. So I'm going to go back in there. Okay, so drawing teaches us patience, and it also teaches us that there are solutions that might not have been easy to get to at first, but it teaches us persistence. But this also gives you a chance to make anything you want. You know, if you want anything, you know, you want a tree and a sky and a sun and a moon and stars and all this kind of stuff, which actually a sky, stars, sun, and moon, I think you can draw. But you may want it a certain bird, like we've got here, or you might want a bear, or you might want a zebra, a horse. I use this method to do a horse. We took, oh my gosh, I think we took 1,000 pictures of this horse, because a horse, you know, has eyes on either side of their head, and in a good portrait of anybody, you'd like to, except for portraits that are pastel profiles, like I did 50 of them a day at Disneyland, then you only have one eye in a profile. But with this horse, we wanted to have at least some of the second eye. Obviously, you can get all of the first eye, but some of the second. And we wanted the horse's head to be like at 3/4 view, and we wanted the light to be perfect on it, so that it would make a better portrait, and it would give me way more information. And we did that, and then we figured out which picture out of the 1,000 of pictures. He had one of those cameras. This guy with a horse had this camera that, you know, clicks off really quickly. So we got lots and lots, and he narrowed it down. He knew his horse. He knew what looked like his horse. And then that's how I got the picture of the horse. It transferred so beautifully. And then I could, we blew up the picture. You always want to blow up the picture to the size. And we literally for at least an hour, deliberated on what the best size would be for the horse, for the outer dimension of the canvas, because I was going to paint it in oil. And so we deliberated on what it would be for the outer dimension of the canvas. And then I had somebody make a canvas that exact size that worked with that picture. Now, this trace in place doesn't work on canvas very well because canvas is bumpy, but what does work really well is to cut out the parts and then trace around them. So that's what I did to get the horse, and the horse had like a rope bridle on. And a lot of my previous life in art was as a fiber artist, and I love fiber, I love rope. And so I was able to get a really good tracing of that and make that very, very realistic with the oil. Are you ready? We're about to reveal and find out where we missed or messed up, but most importantly, I don't have one side here, and I went over it, so that means I need to back up this, and I'm going to just pull that over here and back it up. And this is where you're changing behavior too. Now I'm on the back, I'm backing it up. You want to be undaunted. You want to be not frustrated. And that's one of the things, is we need lots of hours of doing drawing and projects, whatever they are, so that we can make things and feel productive and happy, and also be using our eyes. Oh gosh, is that great or what? And our hands all at once. Let's see if I got the top of that. Didn't really get the top of that exactly where I wanted it, so let's be precise and back this up better. So any place that didn't get backed up well enough to transfer, there you go. We're going to get that right back on there, and each time I align it with the image that's underneath it. So that's how I know where to go with that. So here we are, and this should all be pretty dandy now. Okay, just a little skip and I can deal with that. So this is how you're going to get any of this. If I wanted to get another bird on here, I could have two birds. I didn't leave room enough to put two birds on the paper, but I could have a second bird this way. I have a little more room this way, but I could have planned that in the beginning. I just wanted you to get to see how to trace this bird, and I also wanted to show you that in selecting birds, you want to get it to where you're going to be able to easily see where things are. This bird's not in total focus on the wing because the wing's moving so fast, and it's hard to see this. And it might be hard to use something like this, maybe, to draw it. Now, you don't have to draw it realistically, but here's a good example where the bird's light and the background is dark, and it's easy, very, very easy to see what that is, how that works. Are you able to see that? I hope you guys can see that. So make sure that when you pick something, it's a good contrast, it's easy to work with. And then with something like this, if you put it onto watercolor paper, you can do it with watercolor. And if you put it onto just drawing paper, it's going to allow you to start just drawing lightly. And that's what I would do, is just do light drawing with your colored pencils and try to just take it out to the edge like that. When you get something where you can see it well enough, if you don't want that dark line, and a lot of times when you transfer, it doesn't transfer as darkly as I did like this. I did it darkly so that you could see that. But one of the things we found, I was mentioning with the art and children students, when they went and worked with their 4-year-olds, they were able to do trace in place. So trace in place to me does not necessarily take, stand in for, take the place of learning to do observational drawing, but it can help you learn to do observational drawing. Now I'm going to erase back with my kneaded eraser. It's this thing that comes in a square. And you can see that once I have the colored pencil on there, which doesn't erase, although you can now buy erasable colored pencils, that I don't have much of the pencil line left, but I do know where my edge is. So you'd want to wait to make sure that you know where your edge is. And then of course you've got your bird to keep working with. And you don't have to copy your bird the same, just like the bird is. And as usual, I'm going to suggest that you go lightly at first. And I'm pretty sure that having this blue underneath, it's so funny, I don't even have a black loaded up here because I typically don't use the black until way later or at all. But anyhow, you can just start now coloring in. And again, you could copy the bird the way it is, or you could change its wings to anything that you wanted. And it's all about you. You're the boss of your paper. You found the bird that you wanted. You traced the bird by tracing first on the front and then turning it over and backing it up on the back. And then in this case, using the positive, the configuration it initially was, to force the graphite on the back, which was 4B graphite, onto the paper. And now you can sit down to a fun time drawing, and especially if you draw lightly and work the whole thing up with different colors. They don't have to be realistic. You can then have your own coloring book, and after that you can be looking for other pieces to put on it. And initially you could have had lots of pieces of tracing paper moving, and I could have had maybe another one back behind here, or this one behind this wing, and the wing would have been in front of it. You can really play. I'm going to suggest that you get multiple pieces of tracing paper going, and then you can push things around and decide where you want things and how you want to draw them. So have fun tracing and placing, and remember, tracing is not cheating. It's a great tool to help you get something that looks like something outlined lightly so that you can actually continue to draw it and make something that you want to make.